Welcome to Windows Server 2022 Administration. I'm Kevin Brown and I will be your instructor for this course. I have been Microsoft certified since Windows NT4, which is in the late 1990s, and I've actually been a Microsoft certified trainer since the year 2000. In this course, I will show you how to set up an entire Microsoft enterprise like you would find in a corporate environment. We will start with Windows Server 2022. I'm going to show you how to install the operating system. We will look at the requirements for the operating system, the deployment options. From there, we will move on to Active Directory. This lets us create a domain environment so I can define users, groups, computer accounts within the environment itself so I can centrally manage all of those things. After we've covered Active Directory, we will move into Group Policy. This allows me to define more than 3,000 policies that I can actually use to manage my computers, my users. So anything from controlling your wallpaper on your computer to your minimum password requirement, controlling settings on your computer, and thousands of other settings can be defined within that group policy. I also cover how to set up a storage area network so you can have these massive storage repositories in your environment that allow you to store your data and how to make that data redundant so you don't have a single point of failure. Every environment that you find yourself in will use virtual machines, which is the ability to take one physical server, and on that one server, you can create these virtual machines which act as their own independent servers. So one physical piece of hardware could allow you to run 2, 3, 4, even dozens of virtual machines. So that helps you reduce your overall cost on hardware. And it also makes sure you can maximize your resources like CPU, memory, storage, because you just run virtual machines and they share all of those resources. Every environment you find yourself in will also deploy file servers. So I'll show you how we can deploy a file server and the configuration options. So if I want to apply limits to how much data can be saved to a file server or to certain directories, if I want to limit the type of data that can be saved, I will show you how to block data based on file extensions. So if I don't want you to save videos or audio files, how that can actually be managed. In addition to those configurations, I also show you how to configure Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, better known as DHCP, which is the ability to automatically assign IP addresses to devices on your network. We also cover the Domain Name System, DNS, which gives me the ability to resolve names to IP addresses. That is incredibly important. Whether you're on your home network, your enterprise network, DNS must exist on every network and is actually a requirement for Active Directory to even be installed in your environment. All environments will apply updates to their operating systems. Whether you are talking about Windows 10, Windows 11, or one of the Windows Server operating systems, Microsoft constantly releases updates for these operating systems. Some of these may be new feature updates, some may be critical updates, some may be security related to address some vulnerability that's been discovered. So it's important we have a way to centrally manage those. If you're on your home network, you simply go through your computer and install updates on your one computer. Well, if I'm on a network with thousands of computers, there's no way for me to individually manage that from one computer to another. So Microsoft's WSUS allows me to download updates from the Microsoft Update website, store those locally on a WSUS server. Now that's one possible option when we deploy WSUS. But I can have those updates stored locally on my WSUS server. I could then go through and test those updates to make sure they don't have a negative impact on any clients in my network. Once I'm done with that testing, I can choose to approve those updates and determine which computers, maybe it's all, maybe it's only a subset, but which computers those updates should actually be installed on. So it gives me centralized administration over all Windows updates we deploy in our environment. I also have a module dedicated to failover clustering. If I am deploying a file server or many other types of servers and services in the environment, I have to make sure those services are highly available. I could not have a single point of failure. An example would be a file server. In my environment, if I have a file server that users are dependent on to do their job, meaning they can't do their job if they cannot access certain shared folders on a file server, if that's true, then I cannot have that file server ever go offline. If this is just one single file server, that is certainly a possibility. You could have a software failure at the operating system level or hardware failure. So with failover clustering, I could have multiple servers, which we call nodes in a failover cluster, and we could configure those to work in conjunction with each other. So if one server fails, the operating system fails, the hardware fails, we're not impacted. We have another server that has access to that same data set. So my users would be completely unaware that there has been any type of failure, and they would still have continued access. We also have to be prepared for the worst thing we can imagine happening. Although we hope failures never happen, sometimes they do, sometimes it's inevitable. So we will also cover disaster recovery, the backup and restore capability natively built into Windows Server. So we'll look at the options for that. I also cover remote access. Many environments do have some type of virtual private network connection, so users, if they are traveling or if they need to work from home, they can securely connect directly through the internet back to the corporate office, and they could access resources like file servers, application servers from wherever they are in the world. So ultimately, you browse our enterprise network from your home just like you are in the office. We will walk through the advantages, disadvantages, many of the concerns associated with that. We will deploy a full VPN solution, and we'll look at the authentication protocols, the tunneling protocols, and discuss the pros and cons of each of those. A technology that is inescapable for practically everyone now is the cloud. So I do have what I consider to be a bonus since it's not directly Windows Server 2022. I have added a module that covers Microsoft Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud technology. In this Azure module, we will look at Microsoft's Intra ID, which is the cloud equivalent of Active Directory domain services you would have in your on-premise environment. So we'll see how we can create users, how we can define devices, how we can create groups within Azure itself. I'll also walk through a full implementation of taking my on-premise Active Directory with my users and computer accounts and groups and how to connect that to Microsoft Azure so objects can synchronize between your on-premise environment and between the cloud. I also cover deploying virtual machines in Azure. So very similar to having on-premise machines in your virtual environment, you can also run virtual machines in the cloud. You just log into those virtual machines through remote desktop, same as you would in your on-premise environment, and you can fully configure those servers the same way you would configure any other server that you would have in your on-premise environment. Most environments also use Microsoft 365. Microsoft 365 heavily integrates into Azure, and it also heavily integrates into your on-premise environment. So we'll also look at the integration between Active Directory in the on-premise environment and Microsoft 365. The reason I consider those to be bonus content is because they are not directly part of Windows Server 2022, but they are extremely important and beneficial for everyone to know if you already work in the cloud. If you don't currently work with the cloud, there's a high likelihood that in the near future you will. So just great information. When you have completed this course, you will fully understand how all of these concepts work with each other and exactly how they're configured. Everything in this course that I cover, I will also demonstrate the actual configuration. So this will not just be a theory-based course, you'll see the implementation for every topic that we cover.